Hello and a warm welcome to this session of readings from the Bhagavad Gita as it is. Today we are going to continue reading the fourth chapter of the Bhagavad Gita as it is, which is titled Transcendental Knowledge. In the last session, we had read up to the 19th verse of this chapter, and today we are going to read verses 20 and 21. So, continuing my journey of acquainting myself with the contents of the Bhagavad Gita as it is, and sharing this journey with you, I am privileged to read today for you verses 20 and 21 of the fourth chapter. So, before we do that, as is the wonderful tradition of our timeless Vedic civilization, I will offer obeisances to the spiritual master and to all spiritual masters seeking their blessings. Om Ajnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Chakshurunmilitam yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkest of ignorance, and the spiritual master opened my eyes with the torch of knowledge. I offer my respectful obeisances to my spiritual master and to all spiritual masters. With that, without taking too much of your time, let me begin reading verse 20 of the fourth chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. Tyaktva karma phala sangam nityatripto nirashrayah karmanya pravritto api naiva kinchit karoti saha. Translation: abandoning all attachment to the results of his activities, ever satisfied and independent, he performs no fruitive actions, although engaged in all kinds of undertakings. This is important, that although he performs all kinds of undertakings, he's engaged in all kinds of undertakings, but still those undertakings are not considered fruitive action. So let us see what Prabhupada has said in his purport, in the context of this verse. Prabhupada writes, this freedom from bondage of action, that is, this freedom from the bondage of the law of karma, is possible only in Krishna consciousness when one is doing everything for Krishna. A Krishna conscious person, Prabhupada explains, acts out of pure love for the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and therefore he has no attraction for the results of action, of the action. He is not even attached to his personal maintenance, for everything is left to Krishna. Nor is he anxious to secure things, nor to protect things already in his protection, or already in his possession. He does his duty to the best of his ability and leaves everything to Krishna. Such an unattached person is always free from the resultant reactions of good and bad. It is as though he is not doing anything. This is the sign of akarma, or action without fruitive reactions. Action that does not bind to the law, which is beyond the law of karma. Any other action, therefore, which is devoid of Krishna consciousness is binding upon the worker, and that is the real aspect of Vikarma as explained herein before. In further adding to Prabhupada's purport, Bhuri Janadasa, Prabhupada the disciple, in his Surrender Unto Me writes that we should not give up work. We should be satisfied by dutiful work. What we should give up is attachment to the fruits of work. This verse, Bhuri Janadasa writes, describes a sadhaka, one endeavoring for perfection. The perfection of this consciousness, which is Siddha, is explained in verses 21 and 22. Bhuri Janadasa writes. So here very clearly Lord Krishna is, as has been explained by both Prabhupada and Bhuri Janadasa, talks about the consciousness with which one who is endeavoring for perfection, who is a siddha, that means one who is endeavoring for Krishna consciousness, works. It is not that he does not work, and Bhuri Janadasa explains that none of us, if we are not in the right consciousness, should give up work. And to take you back a little, this is all being said in the context of Arjuna wanting to give up battle, give up fighting, because he has seen in front of him all his his grandsire Bhishma Pitama, his beloved grandsire Bhishma Pitama, his revered acharyas, Dronacharya, Kripacharya, all his brothers, nephews, and friends, and their sons and grandsons, and he is overcome with emotion. He does not want to fight, although he is a warrior who is known across the three worlds for his valor, for his skill. He's practically someone who cannot be defeated, someone who has defeated Lord Shiva even. And so now Arjuna is saying he does not want to fight. So Lord Krishna is explaining to Arjuna that, and here he questions Lord Krishna that, why are you telling me to fight? So he says that, I don't want to fight, he says. And he gives various reasons. So then he doesn't want to incur sin. So Lord Krishna is explaining to him, that means what is karma? What is akarma? What is vikarma? So in this verse, Lord Krishna is telling him that, is explaining further the concept of akarma. And he says that, someone who is not in the right, there are different degrees of consciousness. Often a person in the process of evolution, that means when the soul is embodied in the physical body, then and the subtle body of mind, ego, and intelligence, it undergoes a process of evolution. And when one is in that stage of consciousness where one has not yet given up the consciousness that one is the body, one continues that identification, and in that bodily identification, one is a Kshatriya whose work, swadharma, is to fight or to administer. Fight meaning not just fight, but for dharma. Who is dharma? Who decides what is dharma, what is not dharma? It is the Creator, and the Creator has, and it is all there in the Dharma Shastras. So Lord Krishna is explaining that for a Kshatriya, to work, to do his work without any attachment, but for Krishna, for the Supreme Lord, that itself is a karma, and it is not binding. So Lord Krishna himself is the charioteer of Arjuna, and he has sanctioned this battle, and so therefore it is for Arjuna to do his duty as per his psychological and physical characteristics. So he is by nature, by his swadharma, by his natural tendency, a Kshatriya, and a Kshatriya has certain characteristics. A Kshatriya doesn't have the characteristics of a Brahmana. He doesn't have a characteristics of a Vaishya or a Shudra. So he, if he has to do what his external in action and his internal dharma or his tendency or nature characteristics must match, otherwise there will be problems. There will be internal problems for him and externally, because people look up to the elite, the best, the Shrestha, as was explained in the third chapter. There will be problems, and therefore Lord Krishna is explaining to Arjuna that when there is no sin, there is no concept of sin or pious action when one does action for Krishna, and that so therefore as is explained, one should not give up work, but one should be satisfied by dutiful work. And what is dutiful work? Dutiful work is as per one's natural psychological and physical constitution or characteristics. And according to that, Arjuna's work is to fight, to protect dharma, and to administer. If he does anything else, there will be problems, and it will be against the natural laws. And so, so when it is done in that manner, it is a karma, because it is done, and not just in that manner, but that dutiful work is also done because it is what Krishna desires. So therefore, then that is a karma, and therefore this verse, Bhurijana Das explains, describes a sadhaka. Sadhaka is not necessarily somebody who is sitting in the Himalayas, having given up all work. One has to have that proper consciousness to be able to be qualified to do that. For the most of us, it is basically we have to do work, but with what consciousness that work is to be done, to be considered a sadhaka, the action of a sadhaka, that is also or the siddha consciousness, to achieve that siddha consciousness through karma, our activities, dutiful work, that is being explained in this verse. And further, as Bhurijana Dasa says, this perfection of consciousness or siddha consciousness is further explained in verses 21 and 22. So we will now move on to verse 21. And this is how verse 21 reads. Nirasiryat chittatma tyaktva sarva parigraha shariram kevalam karma kurvan napnoti kilvisam. In the purport, Prabhupada writes, such a man of understanding acts with mind and intelligence perfectly controlled, gives up all sense of proprietorship over his possessions, and acts only for the bare necessities of life. Thus working, he is not affected by sinful reactions. So, in the purport, Prabhupada writes that a Krishna-conscious person does not expect good or bad results for his activities. And this is very interesting, and we've already also discussed, Prabhupada's discussed it earlier, that he's explained that good or bad reactions both bind us to the law of karma, and which actually perpetuates the cycle of birth, death, old age, disease, and death. And the soul has to continue in that transmigratory cycle. But so good results, one has to come back to enjoy those good results of one's pious acts, and for bad results also, one has to come back to be punished for that. But a karma, when activities are neither good, one doesn't think of the results of the action, but rather does it as a service to the Lord, because the Lord would desire that, would be happy with that. And for us, it would be as per instructions of the Guru. Then he is not affected by this, bad or good results, and he's certainly not affected by sinful reactions. Again, this is in context to Arjuna saying that he will incur sin if he kills his friends and relatives and so on, which is actually true. unless it is done as a service to Krishna as per the instructions of the Lord, for the because the Lord would approve of that, for the protection of dharma. So in the purport, Prabhupada writes, a Krishna conscious person does not expect good or bad results. His mind and intelligence are fully controlled. He knows that because he is part and parcel of the Supreme, the part played by him as a part and parcel of the whole is not his own activity, but is only being done through him by the Supreme. So, this is the consciousness. This is how the mind is controlled. The mind and intelligence of a Krishna conscious person is controlled. He understands that he is not independent, but is just a part and parcel of the Supreme, and the part played by him as a part and parcel of the whole is not his own activity, but is only being done through him by the Supreme. So the consciousness has to be like that. It is not that we are doing things for our own satisfaction, thinking that it is whatever we are doing and whatever results we are receiving are because of our own intelligence and our own mind. That is not the consciousness. That is not the consciousness that considers one a part and parcel of the Lord, and is not a consciousness which considers whether our activity will be approved by the Lord or not, but is more concerned whether that activity would please oneself or not, or help to raise one's stature in human society, material human society. With that consciousness, if it is done, it is not Krishna consciousness. But Krishna consciousness means that action is done, understanding that one is a part and parcel of the Lord, and the activity and the results are somehow like one understands that what is being done by him is through the Supreme. Prabhupada explains this with an illustration. He says that when our hand moves, it does not move of its own accord, but by the endeavor of the whole body. So also a Krishna conscious person is always dovetailed with the supreme desire, for he has no desire for personal sense gratification. He moves exactly like a part of a machine. As a machine part requires oiling and cleaning for maintenance, so a Krishna conscious man maintains himself by his work just to remain fit for action in transcendental loving service of the Lord. He is therefore immune to all reactions of his endeavor. So he's therefore whatever he's doing is a karma. Prabhupada further explains that like an animal, he has no proprietorship even over his own body. A cruel proprietor of an animal sometimes kills the animal in his possession, yet the animal does not protest, nor does it have any real independence. A Krishna conscious person, fully engaged in self realization, has very little time to falsely possess any material object. For maintaining body and soul, he does not require unfair means of accumulating money. He does not therefore become contaminated by such material sins. He is free from all reactions to his actions. This is very, very important, but one should not, and one has to be very clear on these points, that what would constitute action in Krishna consciousness and what would constitute action for oneself or even for so-called human society, which is unlinked to the Lord. So if it is for oneself, then that is not in accordance with Shastra, so that becomes vikarma. And if it is pious activity, but it is it has no link with the Supreme, then it is again one cannot come out of the bondage of karma or the law of karma. So one cannot come out of the transmigratory cycle. But if one just continues to work according to one's natural characteristic, that is whether one is a Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, or Shudra, and this is linked to the supreme. In that case, it becomes beyond a pious act, and it becomes that is proper sadhana, and it is movement towards siddha, or perfection of consciousness, where there is complete oneness with the desire to serve the Lord, and oneness to just follow the whatever is the wish of the Lord. So when one reaches that kind of consciousness, or endeavors to reach that kind of consciousness, then the person, although acting, because one has to maintain the body, and one is not at that level of consciousness where one can go off to the Himalayas. That is also not really recommended is not really an integral part of Krishna consciousness, but simply to do everything as a service to Krishna. And it begins with, for a beginner, it begins with simple things like having only prasadam, that is, that which is offered to the Supreme Lord, because one has to cook. One is not an animal. Or even if one is not doesn't cook, one has raw food. Then it has to be what is acceptable to Lord Krishna, and it is explained in the later verses that what is acceptable to Krishna is patram, pushpam, phalam, toyam. Patram is leaves, that means vegetables. Pushpam, flowers, fruits, phalam, fruits, toyam, water. So, and variations of these are what is acceptable to the Lord. So, this is then offered to the Lord, because everything has life. So, even that could be sinful. So, therefore, it is offered to the Lord and sanctified. And then, because we have to maintain ourselves, we have the body. Jive jivasya jivanam. There is a food chain, there is a food cycle. So one has to eat. There is a proper food chain to be followed. So then, whatever is the natural for us, like we are by nature, our systems are very